It wasn't the first time she said something odd, but that day, that was different. I remember the exact moment I started to question everything. It wasn't a grand confrontation or a whispered secret. It was a simple, offhand remark. And that's the thing with Clara. She had this way of speaking in a casual tone, as though she didn't understand how much weight her words carried. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee. Clara was moving around, getting ready for work. The sound of the morning routine, the microwave beeping, the rustle of papers, filled the room. Everything seemed normal, but there was a shift in the air, an almost invisible crack in the surface of our usual life. She looked over her shoulder at me, smiling, like she had just realized something. "You know," she began, "I really think it's fine to have a best friend of the opposite sex. I mean, it's just friendship, right?" I wasn't sure how to respond. At first, it just sounded like an opinion, an idle thought. But the more I replayed it in my mind, the more it unsettled me. Why did she say it? And why now? We had never really discussed that before. I set my coffee down, feeling my heart race for reasons I couldn't quite understand. She was acting so nonchalant, so confident, that it made my unease feel like a personal flaw. Was I reading too much into this? The words replayed in my head. It's fine to have a best friend of the opposite sex. It seemed harmless, almost empowering. But I couldn't ignore the strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. Clara had always been a social person. She loved having friends, and I was okay with that. But there was something about the way she said it that sounded like permission. Permission for what exactly? Was she giving me the green light to do the same? I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But I couldn't help it. A few days later, I decided to test the waters. After all, if it was okay for her to have a best friend, I could find one too, right? It felt almost like a game. But I wasn't playing with the same rules anymore. So, I went out and did something completely out of character for me. I signed up for a hiking club, something I had always been too hesitant to do. It wasn't like I was looking for an affair, but there was something about the idea of having a best friend who wasn't Clara, something that felt like a small rebellion, a way to even the playing field. The first time I met Sarah from the hiking group, it was casual. Just a group of strangers coming together to hike and talk about nothing in particular. But Sarah, she was different. She was funny, smart, and easy to talk to. I found myself looking forward to our hikes more than I thought I would. And slowly, Sarah became more than just a hiking buddy. We'd meet up for coffee after a hike, sometimes talk about life, and even text each other about random things. I didn't think it would go anywhere, and to be honest, I wasn't even sure I wanted it to. But it was something I hadn't had in a long time. Someone who wasn't Clara, someone I could connect with without the weight of marriage hanging over us. And then one night, a few weeks later, it happened. Clara came home late from work, a little tipsy, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. She dropped her purse on the table and greeted me with an exaggerated kiss on the cheek. "Guess who I ran into tonight?" she asked, grinning. I raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Ben. Remember him? The guy from my old office?" I nodded, trying to look interested. Ben was the guy she talked about sometimes, but I had always gotten a weird vibe from him. He wasn't a bad guy, but there was always something. Too smooth, too eager. "He asked me out to dinner," Clara continued. "Said we should catch up. So I went." She paused, her smile fading a little. "It was fine, but it made me think about you, and how we need to have more fun, you know? I've been so caught up with work and everything. I forgot how to just enjoy myself." I didn't say anything at first. My mind was already elsewhere, my thoughts racing. Why didn't she tell me about Ben sooner? And why did she seem so carefree about it? It was almost as if she was giving me permission again. And that thought, that nagging voice in my head, wouldn't stop whispering. What if it's not just Ben she wants to have fun with? The next morning, I was sitting at the table again, coffee in hand. Clara was getting ready for work, chatting on the phone with her friend, not even noticing how much I was listening. Her voice sounded lighter than usual, almost like she was hiding something. And that's when it hit me. This was no longer just about permission. This was about something deeper, something I hadn't expected. And that, right there, changed everything. That day was different. Clara and I had spent the whole morning in a weird silence, one that neither of us acknowledged, but that we both felt. It wasn't a fight or a disagreement. It was something far more unsettling. It was like we had both said everything we needed to say without actually speaking. Her eyes, though, they told a different story. They were empty, distant, like she was somewhere else entirely. And me? I was left in this strange limbo, wondering how things had gone so wrong so quickly. The more I thought about the things she said, about Ben and how casually she spoke about him, the more I realized how little I knew about their history. The cracks in our marriage had been so small at first, just minor shifts here and there, but now, they were starting to feel like a chasm that was widening with every passing day. A few days passed, and Clara continued to go out with Ben more often. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to seem possessive, but I couldn't ignore the unease that was crawling through my veins. It wasn't the going out that bothered me. It wasn't even Ben's presence. It was the way she seemed so carefree about it all, like nothing had changed, like the boundaries we once had no longer mattered. I had always been the quiet one, the one who didn't stir the pot. But now, I could feel my patience starting to unravel. One evening, after Clara had left for yet another drink with Ben, I found myself staring at my phone. I didn't want to call her, didn't want to seem clingy, but I was desperate for something. An explanation, a hint of where we stood. So, I sent her a message. Hey, are you okay? It was vague, safe enough to not seem needy, but enough to let her know I was thinking about her. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. The dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. But no message came. The phone in my hand was suddenly so heavy, a weight I couldn't ignore. Was she avoiding me? Did she even care? The sound of her keys in the door startled me, and I quickly shoved my phone aside. She walked in, smiling that smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, her laughter trailing behind her like a fog. She was drunk again, a little too tipsy for my liking. Sorry I'm late, she said, kicking off her shoes. Ben and I got caught up talking. You know how it is. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't bring myself to. She didn't look guilty, didn't look like she thought she'd done anything wrong. She was completely fine, so why was I the one feeling so twisted inside? We sat there in silence for a few moments, the awkwardness hanging between us like an invisible barrier. The kind of silence you can't fill no matter how many words you try to squeeze in. Finally, she spoke. I've been thinking, she started, her voice quieter than usual. Maybe we should take a break. Just a little space, you know? The words hit me harder than anything else she could have said. A break? What did that even mean? We had been fine, sure, not perfect, but who was? I wasn't looking for perfection, just a little stability, a little respect for what we had. But now, she was suggesting a break? I forced a smile. Yeah, okay. Maybe it's a good idea, I said, but the words felt hollow. I could feel my heart sinking with every second. This wasn't what I wanted. This wasn't how I envisioned my life with her. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind couldn't stop racing. A break. What was I supposed to do with that? Space. What did she need space for? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. And the worst part? I was starting to feel the distance between us, starting to realize how little I mattered to her anymore. I turned over in bed, trying to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, the same thoughts circled in my mind. She didn't need a break from Ben. She needed a break from me. The next day, Clara wasn't herself. She had been quiet all morning, not the usual chipper version of herself. And then, just before she left, she said, I'll be back late tonight. You're okay with that, right? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I wasn't okay with it, not at all. But I wasn't going to start an argument, especially not over something that felt so trivial. A part of me wanted to ask, wanted to demand answers, but I stopped myself. I had become a coward in my own marriage, afraid to upset her, afraid to ask the questions that could break everything. So, I kept quiet. But as soon as she left, something in me snapped. I couldn't stand this feeling of helplessness anymore. I had to do something. I had to regain some control over my life, over this relationship that was slipping through my fingers like sand. I grabbed my phone and sent Sarah a text. Hey, do you want to grab coffee sometime? It wasn't much, but it was something. Something that wasn't Clara, something that didn't involve the mess of our marriage. I needed to do this for me. I didn't think it would lead anywhere. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I even wanted it to. But as soon as I hit send, I felt a strange sense of relief. Maybe I wasn't so helpless after all. The next few days felt like I was walking on a tightrope. Every conversation, every glance between Clara and me was charged with an energy I couldn't ignore. There was a kind of distance that had crept in between us, subtle but undeniable, and no matter how much I tried to close the gap, it only seemed to widen. Clara was still going out with Ben regularly. It wasn't the frequency that bothered me. It was the way she came home each time, the way she seemed more at ease, more herself when she was with him. I wasn't an idiot. I could tell she was hiding something, or maybe she just didn't care enough to hide it anymore. I kept telling myself that I was overreacting. After all, she had every right to have friends, and I had no business questioning her relationships. But deep down, I knew something was off. I started second-guessing everything. When she mentioned her plans with Ben or talked about him in passing, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their friendship than she was letting on. I was trying to be the understanding husband, the guy who respected her independence. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of who I was in this marriage. It felt like I had become an afterthought, just a shadow lurking in the background of her life. Then came the evening that would change everything. I had taken the afternoon off work, feeling like I couldn't take it anymore. The stress of waiting for Clara to come home, the constant wondering whether she was still just friends with Ben, was eating at me. I had no evidence of anything, no clear proof that she was cheating, but there was a gut feeling that wouldn't let me rest. I decided to act. I wasn't sure why I did it, but when I saw Clara's phone lying on the counter as she ran to the bathroom, I couldn't resist. I knew it was wrong. I knew it would probably make things worse, but I unlocked it. I wasn't prepared for what I found. I skimmed through the messages, reading through casual exchanges with friends, family, and colleagues. But then, near the bottom, I saw it. A text from Ben. "Can't wait to see you tonight. We'll have a good time, like old times." My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't what the text said, it was the way it made me feel. The casual tone, the intimacy of the words. It wasn't a friendly message. There was something more in that sentence, something that felt like a secret. And it hit me all at once. I wasn't the only one in this marriage anymore. I quickly put the phone down, feeling my pulse race. I wanted to confront Clara right then and there, but a part of me told me to wait. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was overthinking it, but the doubt had already taken root. When Clara came out of the bathroom, I tried to act normal. I forced a smile, trying to suppress the storm brewing inside me. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and began talking about her day, but I couldn't focus on her words. All I could think about was that text. It was like I was seeing her for the first time, and suddenly, I couldn't trust her. Not just because of that message, but because of how long I had ignored the signs. She had pulled away from me long before I noticed. She had started doing things I never would have allowed if I had paid more attention. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Clara, her breathing soft and steady, while my mind raced through 1,000 scenarios. I thought about Ben and his messages. I thought about the way Clara had acted so nonchalantly about their friendship. I thought about how nothing felt the same anymore. Around 2 a.m., I heard her phone buzz again. She didn't stir, but I did. I couldn't stop myself from picking it up. The message was from Ben. "I'm just thinking about you. Don't be mad. It's just that we're so good together. I'm sorry if I made you feel guilty." My stomach turned. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, to confront her right then. But I didn't. I just put it back down, slowly, quietly, trying not to wake her. I lay there for what felt like hours, the weight of the truth sinking in. She wasn't just my wife anymore. She was someone else's secret, someone else's obsession. And in that moment, I realized that the only way to get back control of my life, to stop this spiral of doubt and misery, was to do what she had done, find my own escape. I wasn't going to wait around anymore. I wasn't going to be the passive husband who smiled through the pain. If Clara could have been, I could have someone else too. It wasn't a decision I took lightly, but it was a decision I had to make. I was done pretending everything was fine. The next morning, Clara woke up like it was just another day. She kissed me on the cheek, and I could feel the cold distance between us. I wanted to tell her what I knew. I wanted to confront her about the messages, to tear down the walls she had built around her and Ben. But I didn't. Instead, I went to my phone and texted Sarah again. "Hey, would you want to grab dinner tonight? Just the two of us?" The day after I texted Sarah, I felt a strange sense of anticipation, like a storm was brewing, but I wasn't sure where it would strike first. I was trying to play it cool, act like I was just going about my day, but inside, I was unraveling. Every text, every conversation with Clara felt like a performance. I had to pretend to be the guy she thought I was, while my mind kept racing in 1,000 different directions. Clara left for work as usual, and I stayed home, pacing around the apartment, wondering whether I should have confronted her that night. The messages from Ben, her casual attitude toward them, the way she was becoming more distant, all of it pointed to one conclusion. I wasn't the priority anymore. She had made it clear, in subtle ways, that I didn't matter. But I wasn't just going to sit here and let that happen. Around noon, Sarah replied to my text. She seemed eager, and I couldn't blame her. We hadn't really spent any time alone since the hiking trip, but now it felt like everything was about to shift. Her message was simple. Sure, I'd love to. How about we meet at that cafe on 5th? I didn't waste any time. I quickly agreed, telling her I'd meet her there in an hour. I felt a rush of excitement mixed with guilt. I knew what I was doing wasn't entirely right. I wasn't trying to hurt Clara, but something inside me told me that if I didn't start doing something for myself, I was going to lose myself entirely. When I got to the cafe, Sarah was already there, sitting at a corner table with a book in front of her, looking completely at ease. She was dressed casually, her smile lighting up her face when she saw me. It was strange how easy it felt to be around her. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people talking. The conversation flowed naturally, with no forced pauses or awkward silences. We talked about everything: work, hobbies, life in general. But there was an undercurrent to it, a tension I couldn't ignore. I wasn't just having a casual chat with a friend anymore. This felt like something more, like I was testing the waters of a life I didn't think I was capable of living. As we sat there, laughing and sharing stories, I couldn't help but think about Clara. How far had I let this go? Was it too late to fix things with her, or was I already too deep in this game of secrets? And the worst part? I didn't have an answer. I didn't know if I wanted to fix things anymore. Maybe it was easier to just let go, to let Clara keep her space, and to see where this path with Sarah led. Around 6 p.m., Clara texted me. Hey, I'll be home late again. Ben and I are having dinner with some friends after work. Hope your day's going well. It wasn't the message itself that got to me. It was the way she said it. Casual, like nothing was wrong. I could feel my blood boil as I read her words. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. And there I was, sitting in a cafe, with Sarah, having the time of my life. I couldn't help but wonder. Was this how Clara felt when she spent all that time with Ben? But I didn't want to dwell on it. Not now. The rush of excitement that had started with my text to Sarah only intensified as the night wore on. I had taken the first step into something new. It wasn't about revenge, at least not entirely. It was about reclaiming a part of myself that had been slowly fading away. I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't just a passive participant in my own life. When dinner came to an end, I walked Sarah to her car, feeling strangely calm. We stood there for a moment, the night air cool against our skin, the world feeling quieter than it had in weeks. I had been afraid to take this step, but now that I had, I didn't want it to end. There was something about Sarah that felt different from what I had with Clara. It wasn't better, necessarily, but it was new, and that newness was exactly what I had been craving. As I said goodbye to Sarah, she gave me a soft smile. I had a great time, she said. Maybe we can do this again soon? I nodded. Yeah, I'd like that. I watched her drive away, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had taken control. I wasn't just going to sit around, hoping things would get better with Clara. I was going to make things happen for myself, whatever that meant. I wasn't sure what I was doing or where it would lead, but I wasn't going to stop now. The game had begun, and I was determined to play it my way. That night, when Clara came home, she barely looked at me. She was tipsy, her movements unsteady, and as she slid into bed beside me, she whispered, I'm tired. I'll explain everything tomorrow. But I didn't need an explanation. I already knew what was going on. I turned to her, forcing a smile. Sure, tomorrow. But I had already made my decision. Tomorrow wasn't going to fix anything. Tomorrow was just another day. The game was already in motion, and there was no turning back. The next few days were a blur, filled with a tension I couldn't shake. Clara seemed more distant than usual, and it wasn't the kind of distance you could ignore. She was physically there, but emotionally, she might as well have been on another planet. And I wasn't sure if I hated her for it, or if I hated myself more for not having the courage to confront her. I could feel the walls between us growing higher every day, and the harder I tried to scale them, the farther she seemed to slip away. Every time I saw her, I could feel the weight of her secrets, the things she was hiding. Maybe it wasn't just Ben anymore. Maybe there was something deeper happening that I wasn't ready to face. I couldn't stop thinking about the texts, about how casual she had been about her outings with him. She'd spent so much time reassuring me, telling me how much she loved me, yet there was always something off when she spoke. There was no guilt in her voice, no hesitation. It was like she truly didn't believe she was doing anything wrong. One evening, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, her legs crossed, staring at her phone. It was like any other night, and yet, the air between us crackled with this electric undercurrent. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal. "How was your day?" "Fine," she replied without even glancing up. "Busy." I stood there for a moment, trying to figure out if she was intentionally avoiding eye contact or if it was just me imagining things. But then I realized I was the one avoiding the real question. I was too afraid to ask her the one thing that had been on my mind for days. "What's going on with you and Ben?" Instead, I just nodded and grabbed a beer from the fridge. "All right," I said, and I plopped down in the armchair across from her. We didn't speak for a few minutes, and the silence felt more suffocating than ever before. It wasn't the kind of silence where you feel comfortable, where you're just existing together in the same space. It was a silence that made you feel like an outsider in your own home. Finally, she broke the silence. "So, what's going on with you? You've been weird lately." I stared at her, my mind racing for something to say. "Weird? How?" She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "I don't know. Just distant. I thought we were good, but lately, it feels like you're pulling away." I wanted to scream. I'm the one pulling away. I'm the one who's been ignored and disregarded, the one who's been stuck in this emotional limbo. But instead of saying any of that, I just smiled and nodded. "I'm fine. Just a little stressed with work, that's all." Her eyes softened, but only for a second. "Okay, if you say so." The conversation didn't go any further than that. We sat there for the next hour, each of us lost in our own world, not really talking, just existing in the same space, pretending everything was normal. But deep down, I knew everything was far from normal. That night, as Clara climbed into bed, I lay there awake, my mind spinning. She was next to me, but I couldn't feel her. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt close to her. Her warmth didn't comfort me anymore. It felt like a reminder of how much had changed, of how far apart we had grown. I wanted to reach out to her, to pull her closer, but something held me back. It wasn't just the physical distance. It was the emotional distance. She was already gone, and I wasn't sure if I had the strength to follow her. I tried to focus on the silence between us, to make sense of everything, but all I could think about was Ben. The way she talked about him so casually, the way she dismissed me and my concerns without even a second thought. I wasn't an idiot. I knew the way things had been going. And then came the moment when it all hit me. A memory popped into my head, something I hadn't thought about in years. Back when we were first dating, Clara had told me she didn't believe in half-love. She said, "If we're in this, we're in it all the way. No distractions, no room for anything else." And I had believed her. I believed her every word, every promise. But now it seemed like she had broken that promise a long time ago. It wasn't just Ben, it was everything. I wasn't her priority anymore, and I couldn't pretend like I didn't see it. She was pulling away, and I was standing here, waiting for her to notice that I was still here. The worst part? I wasn't sure if I even wanted her to notice anymore. I wasn't sure I cared if she did. Maybe it was easier to pretend that I was okay, that everything was still fine, than to face the truth that our relationship was no longer what it used to be. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something else. Maybe I had been the one to check out a long time ago, too. Maybe I had been hiding from the truth, just as much as Clara had. I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I had to make a choice. I had to either confront her and risk everything or walk away and find something new, something that would make me feel alive again. That night, I decided. I wasn't going to wait around anymore. The game wasn't just about Clara and Ben anymore. It was about me taking control of my own life again. Tomorrow would be the day everything changed. The next morning was the hardest one yet. Clara woke up before me, like she always did, her side of the bed empty as I slowly opened my eyes. I could feel her presence lingering in the room, but the gap between us was undeniable. She was moving through the motions, getting dressed, brushing her hair, making her coffee, but there was something about her movements that seemed mechanical, like a person going through a routine, not someone who was fully present. I lay in bed, my mind reeling from the decisions I had made in the past few days. The conversation with Sarah had sparked something inside me. It wasn't about her, not really. It wasn't even about what Clara had been doing with Ben. No, it was deeper than that. I had spent so much time in this marriage, in this relationship, trying to make things work, trying to ignore the cracks that were already there, already widening. But now, I had to face the fact that I was just as much to blame for everything falling apart. I'd been avoiding the truth just as much as Clara had. It was easier to ignore the signs, to bury my doubts in the back of my mind, and to let things play out. But I was done. I couldn't pretend anymore. I had to stop pretending that we were okay. I had to stop pretending that this marriage, the life we built together, was something I could save by simply holding on. Because holding on was slowly suffocating me. Clara came over to the bed, bending down to kiss me on the cheek. "I'll be late tonight," she said in her usual, nonchalant tone. "Dinner with work people. Don't wait up." It wasn't the words themselves that hurt. It was the indifference, the lack of anything that felt like affection. It had become so casual between us, so expected, that the thought of her being with Ben and his work friends didn't faze her in the least. It was just part of her day, part of her life, without me. And as much as I hated to admit it, I had been living in that same detached world for far too long. She left without another word, and I sat there in silence, staring at the spot where she had been. My heart was heavy with the weight of everything I had been ignoring. For so long, I had put up with her absence, her emotional distance, telling myself it was just a phase, just work, just life. But now it was clear. She wasn't going to change. She wasn't coming back to me, and neither was I. I stood up and walked into the living room. The apartment felt cold, empty, even though Clara was only a few miles away. I walked over to the bookshelf, pulling out an old journal that had sat untouched for months. It was a habit I had abandoned long ago, but now, in the silence of the apartment, I felt the need to write. To write about everything I had been feeling, everything I had been holding in. I sat down at the kitchen table, the pen in my hand trembling slightly as I began to write. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the way, I stopped recognizing her. I stopped recognizing myself. The words came out faster than I could keep up with them, like I was trying to unload all the thoughts that had been building up for months, years even. I wrote about Clara and Ben, about the way she had started pulling away, about the way I had let it happen too. But I also wrote about me, about how much I had been neglecting myself, thinking that if I just stayed quiet and put up with it, everything would be fine. But it wasn't. It hadn't been for a long time. And it was time for me to stop pretending. By the time Clara texted me later that night, asking if I wanted to meet her for dinner, she had canceled her plans with her work friends. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her anymore. I wasn't going to keep pretending like I didn't feel the betrayal, like I didn't see through the lies. I texted her back, telling her I wasn't interested in meeting up. It wasn't a dramatic text, just a simple, "I'm not in the mood tonight." But it felt like the biggest decision I had ever made. It was the first time in a long time that I had made a choice for myself. It was the first time I had let go. The phone sat on the table, vibrating with her response, but I didn't check it. I didn't need to. I had already made my decision. I was done. I spent the next few hours packing my things. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. I wasn't going to wait around anymore. I wasn't going to let this life continue without feeling alive in it. I wasn't going to let Clara's indifference be my excuse to stay silent. When I left, I didn't tell Clara. I didn't need to explain myself. It wasn't her fault, and it wasn't mine either. It was just the end of something that had run its course. I drove, not knowing where I was going, but knowing I couldn't stay in that apartment for another minute. I had no plan, no destination. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lost. I felt free. And as I drove away, the weight on my chest lightened with every mile. I wasn't running from Clara. I was running toward something better. Something that was waiting for me to take the first step. The city lights blurred past me as I drove, the hum of the tires on the asphalt providing a strange sense of comfort. I didn't know where I was going, or if I even needed to know. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't worried about Clara or the life I had left behind. I was focused on the road ahead, and, more than anything, I was focused on the space I had created for myself. It felt like breathing for the first time in months. I pulled off at a small diner just outside the city, the neon sign casting a pale glow in the otherwise quiet night. It was the kind of place that felt timeless, where you could sit with a cup of coffee for hours and no one would bother you. I walked inside and found a booth near the back, away from the few other patrons. I wasn't there to make small talk or engage with anyone. I was there to think, to process. As I sat there, sipping my coffee, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to look at it. I knew it was Clara. It had been hours since I sent that text, hours since I made the decision to let go. But still, her name on the screen tugged at something inside me. A part of me wanted to respond, to explain myself, to apologize. But I had nothing to apologize for. I had made my choice. She didn't deserve an explanation. Not yet. Not until I was ready to give her one. I put the phone face down on the table and let the silence settle around me. My mind wandered back to the last few weeks, to everything that had led me to this moment. I thought about Clara and Ben, about their growing closeness, about the countless times I had overlooked the little signs, convinced that things would work themselves out. But they didn't. And now, here I was, sitting alone in a diner, waiting for a life that didn't belong to me anymore. The door to the diner opened with a jingle, and I looked up absent-mindedly. My eyes landed on a woman standing in the doorway, her figure framed by the bright light outside. She looked like she had stepped straight out of my thoughts. She was wearing a leather jacket and had an air of confidence about her that was impossible to ignore. Her eyes scanned the room, and for a brief moment, they locked with mine. I looked away quickly, not wanting to draw attention to myself, but I couldn't help the feeling that something had shifted. I felt like I had just walked into a story where I didn't know the plot yet. The woman walked toward the counter, ordered a coffee, and then, as if drawn by some invisible force, she turned and started walking in my direction. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, her voice smooth, like velvet. I blinked, unsure of how to respond. I wasn't exactly in the mood for conversation, but something about her presence, something about the way she looked at me, made me want to say yes. I wasn't sure why. No," I replied, gesturing to the empty seat across from me. "Go ahead." She smiled and slid into the booth, her presence immediate and commanding. She didn't waste time with small talk. "You look like you're thinking about something important," she said, her gaze never leaving mine. I wasn't sure what to say. I hadn't expected anyone to speak to me like this, especially not in the state I was in. But something about her, the confidence in her eyes, made me want to open up. "I guess I am," I said, finally meeting her gaze. "Just trying to figure things out." She leaned back in the booth, studying me with a look of curiosity. "Things like what?" I hesitated. I didn't know if I should get into it, especially with a complete stranger. But I didn't feel like a stranger anymore. There was something comforting in her directness, something that made me feel like I wasn't as alone as I had thought. "My marriage," I said, the words coming out before I even realized it. I just left my wife. I don't know what's next." Her eyes softened, just a fraction. "That's a big step," she said quietly. "Why did you leave her?" The question hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just a simple question. It was a challenge. I had been avoiding asking myself that very question for weeks. Why had I left? Was it because of Clara's actions, or because of my own fears and regrets? "I think I lost myself somewhere along the way," I replied honestly. I didn't even realize it until I started waking up, feeling like I was living someone else's life. It's like everything had become about her, her job, her friends, her life, and I stopped existing in it. So, I had to leave. For me. She nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "It sounds like you're doing the right thing, even if it feels like the hardest thing you've ever done." I could feel my walls starting to crumble just a little bit. I didn't want to get too personal with her, but something about her presence made me feel like I could share the parts of myself that I had kept hidden for so long. "Yeah, it's hard," I admitted. "I still love her, but I don't know if I can keep living in a lie. I don't know what's real anymore." For a long moment, she didn't speak, just watched me with a steady gaze. Then, she surprised me by reaching across the table, placing a hand on mine. "You'll figure it out," she said, her voice low but reassuring. "Sometimes the hardest part is just admitting you don't have it all figured out." For some reason, that simple gesture made something inside me snap. I wasn't looking for answers from her. I wasn't looking for sympathy. But in that moment, with her hand on mine, I realized that maybe I wasn't as lost as I thought. Maybe this wasn't the end of the road. Maybe it was just the beginning. The silence stretched between us, comfortable and unspoken. And in that silence, I felt like I had found something I didn't even know I was looking for. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like it carried more weight than the last. I sat there across from her, my hand still resting in hers, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of calm. The chaos of my life, the mess I had left behind, seemed distant, like I was finally able to breathe. It wasn't that I had everything figured out or that I was suddenly free from the past, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of my own story. It was a strange feeling, like stepping into the unknown with the courage to face whatever came next. Her name, I realized, was Ava. She hadn't shared much about herself yet, but I didn't mind. This wasn't about her, not really. This was about me. It was about taking the first step toward finding out who I was when I wasn't just a husband, when I wasn't just living for someone else. It was about rediscovering the person I had lost along the way. I didn't expect to meet someone like you tonight, I said, my voice quiet but genuine. But I think I needed this. I didn't realize how much I needed to just talk to someone who wasn't involved in everything I've been running from. Ava smiled softly. Sometimes, all we need is a fresh perspective. It's funny how life brings us exactly what we need when we're ready for it. I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. She wasn't offering me a solution or trying to fix anything. She was just listening, just being. And that was all I needed right then. The clock on the wall read almost midnight, but I didn't feel the usual anxiety of an approaching day, the pressure of tomorrow's uncertainties. I felt, for the first time in ages, a lightness that I couldn't describe. You know, I said, as the conversation turned more lighthearted, I don't know what happens next, but I think I'm ready for whatever comes. I've spent so long being stuck, being afraid of change, and now I realize that maybe this is exactly what I need. To just live. Ava's smile deepened, and she squeezed my hand again, a comforting gesture. I think you're on the right path. It's not about having everything figured out right away. It's about starting somewhere, and it looks like you've already made a huge step just by being here, by letting yourself feel something again. I looked at her, this stranger who had somehow brought clarity when I didn't expect it. I wasn't ready to walk away from my past entirely, but I was ready to stop letting it control me. The guilt I'd been carrying was starting to lift, not because I had all the answers, but because I knew now that I didn't need them all at once. It was enough to just be. We sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, and I realized that the next chapter of my life was starting, not with some grand, life-altering decision, but with small steps. It wasn't going to be easy, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that I had made the choice to stop waiting for life to happen and to make it happen for myself. Ava stood up, stretching slightly. Well, she said, I don't know about you, but I could use some fresh air. I nodded, feeling a lightness in my chest that I hadn't felt in forever. That sounds perfect. As we walked outside into the cool night, the city stretched out before us, full of endless possibilities. I wasn't sure where I was headed, but for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the journey. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. For the first time, I felt like I could take on whatever came next. And that, I realized, was exactly what I had needed all along. A reminder that life doesn't always give you the answers, but it does give you the chance to start again, to be who you truly are. And as the stars above us twinkled brightly, I knew one thing for certain: my story wasn't over. It had just begun.